Good evening. I welcome you all to this meeting of the Cardinia Shire Council. Please note that this meeting is being webcast live over the internet on Council's website. Councillors will be available after this meeting if any members of the gallery wish to discuss issues of interest. We will commence this meeting with the following prayer. Almighty God, we humbly request that you bestow your blessings upon this council, direct and prosper our deliberations to the advancement of your glory and to the betterment of the people of Cardinia Shire. Amen. The Cardinia Shire Council respectfully acknowledges that we are on the traditional land of the Bunurong and the Wurundjeri people and pay our respects to the elders past and present. We've received apologies tonight from Councillor Brown, Councillor Schilling, Councillor Ryan and Councillor Jodie Owen. So the gallery may notice that there's a few missing seats here. Unfortunately, there's a few people unwell tonight and were previously occupied. So, but yes, and I see Mr. O'Hara doing a quick count, and we have our quorum. Thank you, Mr. O'Hara. It's good to see that the gallery is keeping check on us all. Thank you. So minutes of the previous meeting. Can I please have a motion to adopt the minutes of the previous meeting as listed? Councillor Letitia Wilmot. And a seconder, Councillor Colin Ross. Thank you. All those in favour? Carried. Declarations of interest. Councillors, do I have any declarations of interest? There being none, before moving to ordinary business, I propose to bring community question time forward. The majority of the questions relate to item 1 on the agenda, being the development plan overlay for the Cardinia Motor Recreation and Education Park, the DP016. If these questions were delayed until later in the meeting, these questions would have become moot as the development plan overlay would have already been discussed. And councillors, any concerns would bring a community question time forward. There being no noted concerns, we will continue. Community question time, we have received 10 questions from Mr. Tony O'Hara, and I see Tony in the gallery there. I will refer your first 9 questions to Mr. Tom McQualter to read and answer. Mr. McQualter, if you would, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Reference DPO 16, page 4 states, Attachment 3, summary submissions - circulated to councillors only. This is a question in 2 parts. Number 1 is, are there any issues in the submissions that the general public should not be made aware of? There are no specific planning issues raised in the submissions that would warrant withholding from the public. And the second part of that question is, if not, as council is expected to be open and accountable, why are the concerns not publicly available as per Attachment 3? The answer to that is submissions that were submitted as part of the advertising of DPO 16 have been received under the provisions of the Planning and Environment Act. This is a different provision to the Local Government Act. Under the process, council is required to consider any submissions received prior to making a decision. However, submissions are not considered public documents as they contain personal detail and identifiable information of the individual or individuals lodging the submission. The next question is, referred DPO 16, page 13 states, a summary of each submission and a response to each of these can be found at Attachment 3. This question is also in 2 parts. Question 3, if the responses are recorded, why have the objectors not been provided those responses? So as previously responded to, the submissions related to the P&E Act, submissions under this Act are not made available to the public. Responses will be provided to individual objectors as per the usual practice following the meeting. Question 4 is, can the general public be assured that councillors have all viewed and been briefed in detail on the responses to the objectors' concerns when these responses have not even been sent to or been made available to objectors? So yes, councillors have been provided with in-depth summaries of the submissions that have been received in objection and support of the proposal, as well as a number of briefing sessions. Councillors were provided copies of such community submissions in full today. Reference DPO 16, page 1 states, the development plan will provide the framework in which planning permits will be assessed. Also, page 15 states that the purpose of the development plan overlay is to exempt an application from notice and review it is generally in accordance with a development plan. So question 5 is, as a development plan is never the final design of a facility, just the intent, and I believe council wants to be seen as open and accountable, why is it considered fair on residents that future planning applications be exempted from notice and review? Under clause 43.04-3 of the Cardinia planning scheme, if a development plan has been prepared and advertised, any planning permits associated with the development plan are exempt from advertising. This requirement cannot be altered under the Planning Environment Act. However, any future planning permits within this precinct by any applicant would need to be considered at an open council meeting or town planning meeting in the future. Reference DPO 16, page 14. As DELP requires a setback of 200 metres from Tumut Creek to provide an appropriate corridor for southern brown bandicoot to traverse through this habitat, and noting that Tumut Creek running through Lot 2 is only 90 metres away from the fence line of Lot 3. Question 6. The purpose of the development plan overlay is to exempt an application from notice and review, and as DELP is the relevant authority, why does the realignment of the fence line need to wait for future proposed works rather than being defined at this time in the process? The answer is the development plan provides an overview on what activities and uses can occur on the site. Any building and works will require separate planning approvals with detailed design plans to be submitted at that point in time, and they can be assessed under the requirements of the scheme, taking into account the views of all of the relevant authorities. The planning permit application will be referred to DELP at this referral process, and DELP will stipulate the required setback. The next section is reference to page 14. In reference to the Environmental Protection Agency, section 52 referral notice, there were general comments provided for the proponent to note in future works approvals. The EPA also provided comments for council's information as they relate to legislation and practicalities in controlling noise emissions. So the question for this section is, have the councillors been presented with and briefed in detail on all comments presented to the proponent, as well as the EPA's comments as provided for council's information? As per our practice, councillors are provided with the summarised advices received from referral authorities. EPA provided no objection to the proposal and provided comments in relation to sewage treatment, as well as offering assistance from a noise management perspective at the planning permit stage of the process. The next section, which is also in relation to the EPA, says page 14 in reference to the Environmental Protection Agency section 52 referral notice. The EPA also supported the recommendation of the submitted acoustic report of further noise assessments being undertaken, including the provision of a noise management plan, and noting the purpose of the DPO is to exempt an application from notice and review. So question 8 is, as the outcome of any further noise assessment can seriously impact on the viability of the facility, why are these further noise assessments not being undertaken prior to the decision being made on the recommendation tonight? And if not, why not? High-level noise mitigation measures were required to be addressed under DPO 16, with a detailed design being considered at planning permit stage. Once detailed design has been undertaken, specific noise mitigation measures can then be recommended by acoustic engineers to the satisfaction of the responsible authority, which is council. Council peer reviewed the noise assessments provided to date that were undertaken by the proponent, and they were deemed satisfactory to meet the requirements of the DPO at this time. Question 9 states, on the assumption that this application will be approved as recommended, what avenues of appeal do normal residents have to challenge this decision, and at what cost? So under the Planning Environment Act and the Victorian Civil Administrative Appeals Act, there are no appeal rights to challenge approval in a decision such as this. Any such person seeking to challenge this decision of council would need to seek their own independent advices as to how this could be done and to what any costs involved could be. We'll obviously provide written responses. Tony has all of that information. It's a lot of information. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you, Mr. McQualter. Tony, your last question asks councillors to advise whether they have read all of the submissions in full. I will offer an answer on behalf of all councillors and state that we take our responsibilities seriously and undertake the responsibility to discharge our responsibilities under the Planning Environment Act with the appropriate due diligence and care, as is required by our position. You may wish to talk to any one of us individually after the meeting to get further clarification on any subjects you have, but I'll leave it there. Thank you, Tony, for your questions. All right. Lastly, we have received 2 questions from Rosa Santo, and I see Rosa in the gallery. I will refer your questions to Mr. Peter Benezik to read and answer. Mr. Benezik, please.
Through you, Mayor. Rosa, thank you very much for your questions. Sorry, my computer's just gone blank on me there, so I need to read them. I've got them. Thanks. Would you please advise who is responsible for cleaning the main street of Pakenham, since the person who has been doing so for so long is unable to do so? Rosa, I can advise that council's responsible for cleaning the main street. There's a range of activities that we undertake in that space, including street sweeping, litter control, graffiti removal and maintenance of the furniture in the site, as well as pavement washing. Your second question relates to when are the plants and vegetations in the main street being watered, and who is responsible for ensuring that it's done regularly? There's 4 planter block boxes near the pedestrian crossings that do have self-watering mechanisms in there. Council staff, contractors and the community provide feedback when watering is required. And in relation to the main vegetation, such as roundabouts, they're considered self-sufficient at this point in time and mature enough to look after themselves. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That completes our community question time. We will revert to ordinary business. The Council conducts its meetings according to a consent agenda. Councillors have advised of the matters for consideration this evening that they wish to discuss or debate. The remaining items will be adopted without discussion. The items withdrawn for tonight's meeting are item number 1, Cardinia Motor, Recreation and Education Park Development Plan, DP016, withdrawn by Councillor Brett Owen. Councillor Owen.
Thank you, Mayor. I move the following, that the Cardinia Motor Recreation and Education Park Development Plan be approved subject to the recommendations attached to this report.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Do I have a seconder for this motion? Councillor Moore. Councillor Owen, back to you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Moore. I just wanted to definitely withdraw this item for councillors to speak to the matters raised in this item. It's been 15 years in relation to this site to get where we are now. Council purchased 335 McGregor Road back in 2004. So gone through the purchase, rezoning, proposed sale, and now the planning process is before us. Councillors tonight wear many hats in relation to obviously what's before us. We're currently the landholder, so there's proposed sale, and also we've got community groups that are desperately need for a permanent home. So tonight we have a number of different hats that we need to consider. The proposed development at 335 McGregor Road is massive. Podium 1 is proposing over a $200 million development. That's massive for our shire, and I can't recall anything quite that size. So this is big. We also obviously have our community motorsports groups, and we know the long history about finding a permanent home. That's also very big, and that's definitely something that is in front and centre of council. So tonight we're considering on the DPO development plan, and for councillors, we have to look at this on planning grounds. I appreciate we've received a lot of correspondence in the recent days, whether it's around noise, whether it's from the Up and District Motorcycle Club in relation to asking councillors to defer this matter until their permanent home is finalised. In relation to the BPO, my understanding is we cannot defer it for those grounds. We've got to defer it, if we are going to defer it, it's got to be on planning reasons. So deferring it for our motorcycle club is not possible, I've been advised. I note that this was advertised and letters were sent out. There was notices on the land, and we received 12 objections, one including a petition from the Blue Horizon estate, and we acknowledge those objections. I've read them this afternoon. I've gone through them again. Also, we received a submission from the Koorup Motorcycle Club as well, and we've received a lot of correspondence in recent days from them. Also, there was 853 persons who've signed up for supporting this proposal, Podium 1. In relation to the noise, as sort of stated in the community questions, that will be determined if a environmental effects statement is required. All those concerns around noise and impacts on residents will be covered through the planning permit process. And councillors are fully aware of those concerns, and that was very loud and clear in relation to the objections about noise. In relation to the Koorup Motorcycle Club, they're frustrated, no doubt. They want to get that permanent home sorted. Last year, through a resolution of council, we determined if we weren't able to get a permanent home, Lot 2 will be allocated to them. So they're frustrated. If this goes through tonight, the full extent of Lot 2 is not possible. But I'm really pleased over the last 18 months, probably 12 months, just over 12 months, we really had really strong conversations, engagement with our two motorsports clubs, and I think that will continue to be positive. And while I'm on council, I will continue to advocate for that permanent home for the Koorup Motorcycle Club. They will still have sections of Lot 2 for them to use for as long as they want. But we know it's encumbered with future wetlands, but we've really tried in recent months to make the most of that Lot 2 and make it usable for the Koorup Motorcycle Club to use in the interim, so we can get that permanent home for them. And that's something I know our officers have been really, in the last 12 months particular, have been really focusing on that. I know councillors are supporting that, and we'll continue to drive that, and that will be a priority of mine, and I'm thinking all councillors. This DPO is required for all parties of this land to move forward. The Pakenham Auto Club, they're in a different boat to the Koorup and District Motorcycle Club. They're extremely happy with the land allocated to them. They want to progress to a planning permit stage in relation to tracks, buildings, earthworks, etc. So, by moving on with this, they can progress. Even in the interim, the motorcycle club, they can progress with works with the land available to them for that purpose. They can progress to a planning permit. If we defer this, that will just stay in idle. So this is exciting news for our Shire in relation to this proposed development, and a long way to go. And we note the environmental concerns that people have got, and I'm sure they will be covered through the planning permit process. And I'm looking forward to continuing to working with our two community clubs to get them their permanent home. So I welcome other councillors' comments on this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. I will go to the seconder to speak, Councillor Graham Moore.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Owen. Firstly, I'd like to thank Tony O'Hara for his questions tonight, and the answers given by Tom McQualter, because it did outline a few of the issues that we had with this DPO, the Development Plan Overlay. It's very complicated. It's a very complicated issue, and being a former member of the Pakenham Auto Club, I believe they are pretty satisfied with their situation, and I feel for the Coorup District Motorcycle Club with the because it's very complicated. It's a very complicated issue, this, and I know with the you spoke about the EES, the environmental effect statement before a moment ago, Councillor Owen, and as the preparation of an EES is not specifically a requirement of this DPO, the DPO 16, and the applicant is investigating this requirement outside the planning process. An EES is not triggered at the time of making the decision on the development plan, like this decision we make tonight. The applicant will be required to have this matter addressed prior to any decision on future planning applications as they relate to the motorsports facility. But I would like to thank you, Councillor Owen, and I speak on behalf of Councillor Brown tonight, who's not here, who is on the steering group, who is our group that's been negotiating with the clubs and done a fantastic job, and of course with our manager of governance, Mr. Doug Evans as well, and done a great job to keep it all together and keep all the information flowing. But this is a process that needs to go through. We need to do this process first before we can move forward. That's why we can't defer it any longer. It has to be done, and so we can move into the next stage of this development. So all your questions have been taken note of, Mr. O'Hara. I'm sure from all the councillors. We've had long discussions about this item, and so I'll leave it there, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. I will just add quickly that I reverberate the sentiments expressed by both yourself and Councillor Owen that we feel this is a process towards moving forward in the best interest that we can, and that we are dedicated to working hard to find the best outcome for the Coorup Motorcycle Club. So that's I think that's been proven and shown in the efforts that have been put forward by Councillor Owen and Councillor Brown and yourself, Councillor Moore. So, do I have any other councillors that wish to speak on this issue? Councillor Colin Ross, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I must say this issue is one of the most frustrating issues I think that we've faced on council ever since I've been here. I know Councillor Owen's heading into his 15th year on council, mine 12th, Councillor Graham Moore into his 10th, Councillor Wilmot into her 8th, and you, Mr. Mayor, into your 4th. And I must say, all of that time, this has been one of the main issues that we've inherited on council. I must say, when I first got on council, the piece of land on McGregor Road was actually purchased, as Councillor Owen said, back in 2004, to put a golf course on, because council was going to buy out the long-term lease of the Pakenham golf course so they could move them down to that site. So it was originally purchased with having in mind a golf course. And then when that got stopped by council and the residential land wasn't built on the golf course site now, and we finished up with what we've got there, which is a wonderful development down there with the Cardinia Environment Coalition and the golf course, getting a new clubhouse and an amazing playground for all abilities. This piece of land became available to do something else with, and this was a long-going issue on motorsports. We had the Pakenham Auto Club, the Coorup Motorcycle Club, who are wonderful clubs who have got many, many members and provide a wonderful club for our residents, had to find a new home. So logically speaking, it was looked upon as that could be the site that they could move into. Nevertheless, over time, through bits of area that you can't use, divided off, cut off, the whole lot of it, we've found that there's a usable pad of site in that area, and it's in a green wedge. Now, by tonight moving this forward, if the recommendation is supported by council, it won't be necessarily the silver bullet that has every single group happy, but I tell you what it will do, it'll move the process forward, because there will be, through this, as it moves through, different groups will get money, because otherwise ratepayers will, and this is one of the issues we had, we tried to find some land that the ratepayers were going to purchase for the clubs or for their facilities, because a lot of the clubs run on shoestring. They don't have a lot of money to spend millions of dollars on their facilities. So council had to try and find, and this location worked out quite well. But the problem was it had to come into fruition. Now, with this, as people read through the report, there's basically a whole lot of conditions and controls involved. And I can tell you, the people who use it, the last thing they would ever want to happen, and this is just answering Mr. O'Hara's question on this, on noise, the last thing they want is to have their licences taken off them. The EPA shut them down, so they actually can't use the facilities that would be built there. So they will be probably their own best people who try and make sure people fall in line of anybody. I must say, this moves this is about the closest council has ever come to having something materialise in this area for all the groups to move forward on. We've tried everything. We've looked at parcels of land, we've been to ministers, we've been to state government parliamentarians, we've been to departments to get them to try and rezone areas. We've looked at all these solutions, but nevertheless, we've hit brick walls in all those areas. They won't rezone some areas that we think look really appropriate. Some people want too much money for what they want us to purchase. So I'm just going to say that I'm going to support the recommendation. I know this isn't the silver bullet for all things, but I tell you what, it's getting closer. And for people of these groups, for residents and motorsports enthusiasts who wanted to see something happen, this is about the closest we've ever got. So I'm going to support it. I hope my fellow councillors do, so we can move forward. And for those who we haven't got the exact solution right at this very moment, as Councillor Owen said and Councillor Moore said, we won't stop, and the Mayor said, we won't stop trying to find the solution for this. We will continue on, but we are slowly working our way through. So I just want to encourage people, if it's frustrating for you, it's a thing I know Councillor Owen has spoke about on and on and on, that we just want to tick the box and we want to move on and make sure that people get what they need. So anyway, that's all. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Do I have any other councillors that wish to speak on this item? That being the case, I'll go back to the mover, to Councillor Owen, to summarise.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you all councillors for your input. Obviously, this DPO, as I said before, is for all three tenants for this site. Obviously, Podium 1, Koorappin District Motorcycle Club and the Pakenham Auto Club. This DPO needs to be sort of adopted to allow for all those parties to proceed what they want to do on their allocated land. I once again acknowledge the frustration that the Koorappin District Motorcycle Club does have and continues to have. Council is going to refine our MOU, our letter of commitment, to further put in concrete Council's commitment to find them a more appropriate, larger size for their activities. We note that that club has been going since 1927. It's got hundreds and hundreds of members, and even this year I think they've got a stack of new members, and that just shows motorsports is a legitimate recreation in our shire that has, in my opinion, been forgotten about for a long, long time. So this site will deliver that high-end motorsports activity for those in that space, but also our two local clubs. That's really important. So we will tighten up that letter of commitment, that MOU, to reaffirm to the Koorappin Motorcycle Club that we are serious in doing everything we can to find them a better site. The Koorappin Club, they can use the remnants of Lot 2, and I know that's not acceptable to them for obvious reasons, but they can use the land that's given to them as part of this DPO. I appreciate the restrictions. So obviously we'll go through the planning permit process when that goes before council, and in my opinion we'll attempt to address all those concerns raised by the objectors. But once again, a total of 12 submissions against, and there was a campaign of support of 853 people who've signed a letter of support for this. So I move so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Councillors, I will now ask you to show your support or against for this in the usual manner. With a show of hands. So all those in support? Carried. Thank you, councillors. We'll move on to item 2. Amendment to Planning Permit T170301-1, including the relocation of the dwelling at 18 Bottomley Drive, Emerald. Withdrawn by Councillor Wilmot. Councillor Wilmot to move.
Thank you, Mayor. I move the recommendation that a refusal to grant planning permit T170301-1 be issued for amendment to the permit, including the relocation of the dwelling at 18 Bottomley Drive, Emerald, on the grounds listed in the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Ross, thank you. Councillor Wilmot, would you like to speak to this?
Thank you, Mayor. It's a little hard to know where to start with this. Initially, when I read the report, I was in favour of the refusal. Today, I spoke to the applicant, and it was quite a long conversation, and he expressed his side of this application and what his point of view is. He disputes and debated some of the information that's contained in this report, and I understand that it's, for the applicant, been quite a lengthy process. It's been somewhat expensive for him, and it's been frustrating for him. And I understand that, and I deeply feel sorry for them for the frustration that they have felt. However, tonight I have to base my opinion on what is contained within this report. And it's pretty clear in the report that there is already history of refusing a dwelling within the separation distance of the broiler farm, I'm making that mistake now, the broiler farm, which is located across the road. Now, those separation distances don't really apply in this particular case because the broiler code is applied for new broiler farms that are being built. And the code says that a broiler farm should not be built within 250 metres or greater of special use zones. A dwelling is considered to be a special use zone. So if a broiler farm can't be built near existing housing, then housing by right shouldn't be built within that buffer of existing broiler farms. The broiler farm has been there since 1973, and the current owners of the broiler farm have been operating it as a successful business for many, many years. So to put a house within that separation zone increases the likelihood that there will be problems with either the odour caused on occasions through broiler farms, noise from truck movements, etc., because trucks come and go every few weeks. So there's a lot of truck movement. There's the potential of complaints is greatly increased if we allow this dwelling to be built within the separation zone. We've previously had an application come before us in 2016, and there's 4 of us sitting at this table tonight that were here when that application came forward, and we refused it because it was within that separation zone and didn't meet the planning permits, the planning framework. So, basing my opinion tonight on what's in front of me in the report and the past history, there's also history down the road at number 9 Bottomley Court, where again it was refused back in 2005. So it's how far back some of this goes. So there is history of refusing, and there is history of VCAT upholding those rulings as well. 2016 took it to VCAT, and VCAT upheld council's decision to refuse the planning permit. So whilst we can't use that as a reason, there is history of it, and we need to look at that history. We had plenty of clauses within our planning framework that protects agricultural use. It also refers to the quality of air, noise abatement clauses, all sorts of clauses within there that are going to protect existing businesses. And this is an existing business, and we need to, whether it's in the right place or not, that's neither here nor there. It is there. It's been there for well over 40 years, coming up for 50 years. So they have a right to exist, and they have a right to operate their business. And for that reason, I'm happy to support the officer's recommendation to refuse this application. But I will make point that there is actually an active permit for this site. They could actually build the house on the site as it is, but this amendment is for it to be built in a different location. The site that's been approved has a higher bushfire attack level of 29, where they would like to move the dwelling to as a much lower of 12.5, I think it was. And I understand that there's an extra cost when you have a higher bushfire attack level rating. It's a higher cost to build your home. The position of that site is there will probably be extra work that needs to be done to meet the CFA's approval, etc. But they could build there. There is nothing to stop them. So on the grounds as the officers have listed in this report, I'm happy to support them and refuse this planning permit amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. I'll go to the seconder, Councillor Colin Ross, to speak.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I must say I concur with Councillor Wilmot on this. It is unbelievably frustrating for people who put in applications when they find out that the recommendation from council is that it should be refused. I must say, on my time on council, there are so many applications that come in that people advise people or help them do their applications who say anything is possible on your land. You can do anything, just put it in there and it can happen. What sometimes they don't tell you is to get zoning in a green wedge or to do certain things can be actually bought unless you can get both sides of Parliament to get a majority decision to support something. You can't actually rezone it or do some of these things. So it becomes extremely hard to get through. And what I try and do is tell people, before you go and spend lots and lots of money on having people write up applications that they say is possible, come and talk to our staff about what they see the impediments might be on the site that you have, and go through it with them and talk with them about the likelihood of having something succeed with a planning application. And this is another example where obviously people have been told that this is possible, it is possible, you can do this. Our planning team have gone through and looked for the impediments that might be in place. They've found some solutions, but unfortunately the application is very, very structured in the way it is, and it hasn't been amended in any of those ways. So unfortunately their recommendation to council is that we are to refuse it because it does not comply with all of the things that it needs to under the State Planning Act. So unfortunately for the applicants, I'm going to put in a refusal on this. I feel really sad for them. I would encourage them in future, or anyone else who puts in applications, please come and talk to our staff. They are really good people. They will come and sit down and talk with you about the thing that you want to do, and they will try and find a solution for you, so then they can write reports that support things. They bring them before council. Council will probably approve them because if it's a supportive report. Anyway, I'll hand it back to the Mayor to see if anyone else wants
Thank
to
you,
speak. Thank
Councillor Ross. Do I have any other councillors that wish to speak to this item? Councillor Owen.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you, other councillors. Definitely, it's a very difficult decision, no doubt. Today I had a long conversation with the applicant on the phone, and he puts a point of view which at times is totally different to council officers' recommendations and reports or comments in the report. So who am I supposed to adjudicate on that? And I think and they are quite different versions of events and discussion points. So I think it's probably best place to let VCAT, if it goes there, to determine long history, different arguments, different positions. Councillor Wilmot talks about that already there's approval for a house location or an envelope, and the applicant tells me today that's got some real issues to it in relation to the environment, location closer to a creek, also excavation works, the impact on the environment to another proposal. So as a councillor, I'm really sort of torn with this. At the moment, as the information sits, I'll be supporting the officer's recommendation, but to be honest, I think for this to be finally sorted, it probably has to be heard by an independent sort of body, that being VCAT, to work this out. So, but I will be supporting the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Do I have any other councillors that wish to speak on this item? There being done, I'll go back to the mover, Councillor Wilmot, to summarise. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Nothing further.
Councillors, we will now put this to a vote. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Next on the agenda is item 4, Cardinia Planning Scheme Amendment C241, Public Acquisition Overlay to facilitate Officer PSP intersections, withdrawn by Councillor Brett Owen.
Thank you, Mayor. I move the following: that Council resolve to seek authorisation from the Minister for Planning to prepare and exhibit Planning Scheme Amendment C241 to the Cardinia Planning Scheme.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Do I have a seconder for this motion? Councillor Wilmot. Councillor Owen to summarise.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. So as the report says, the proposed amendment is required to implement the recommendations of the Officer Precinct Structure Plan 2011. The Officer PSP guides the delivery of a quality urban environment and sets a vision for how land should be developed. Plan 15 is the road network of the Officer PSP, details the location for the future transport network, including development of intersections. So a public acquisition overlay is required to facilitate the design and development of the 3 intersections along the Princess Highway. And they are the intersections of Whiteside Road, Timdale Road and McMullen Road. And we know that these will be much bigger intersections in the future, and land is required to achieve that. So obviously this just makes sense that we go through this process so we can acquire the land and build these intersections. And we know there's a program over the coming years to develop a large number of intersections along the Princess Highway through the Officer Precinct Structure Plan, Officer DCPs, and also the federal government assistance we're getting. So this is required. So I ask councillors to support this so we can get on with the design of these intersections that are much needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. I'll go to the seconder, Councillor Wilmot, to speak.
Thank you, Mayor. I think Councillor Owen has summed it up fairly nicely. And as he said, these intersections are set to grow in size, and certainly they'll be busier and busier as the rest of Officer fills up. I just note that there will be an opportunity where, just trying to find the right spot in the report, for some consultation with the landowners that are affected. So they will be notified via letter, and there'll be a 4-week consultation period in February, March of next year, where they'll be able to have their input into this. So it's inevitable, I guess, that these intersections along the highway are going to keep getting busier. This is the first 3. There will be a lot more along the highway as years go by. And yeah, you'll see in the maps that most of it's just very small bits of land. It's not great, but it just means that we'll be able to put turning lanes and so forth, which will make those intersections work a lot better. So I support this going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. Do I have any other councillors that wish to speak on this item? Councillor Ross.
I concur with my fellow councillors on this. For anyone who wants to look at the report, you can actually see it's just about making intersections a bit wider, having an extra slip lane, having wider space when you turn into different roads. That comes with areas like Whiteside Road, which was probably designed to have no more than a couple of hundred cars a day ever go up it, and potentially will have thousands of cars in the long run. A little bit like McGregor Road, which was designed for 750 cars, and it's got 14,000 cars going down it. So, you know, with growth and with this comes the need to acquire different bits of land, and these are quite small parcels of land, but nevertheless very significant to make the traffic flow much safer. and much easier. So I support this, and hopefully we can get this through, and therefore we can go and put an overlay on those to improve those intersections. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Any other councillors that wish to speak to this item? There being none, I'll go back to the mover, Councillor Owen, to sum up.
Thank you, Mayor. No further. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councillors, we'll vote in the usual manner. All those in favour? Carried. I'll now move on to item 7, petition objecting to planning permit application, withdrawn by Councillor Brett Owen.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that the petition lodged by residents of Guys Hill objecting to a planning permit application for a telecommunications tower at 145 High Street, Guys Hill, be received and noted and be considered as an objection to the Planning Permit T170301-1 when this application is considered by the Council or Town Planning Committee in the new year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Do I have a seconder for this item? Councillor Wilmot. Councillor Owen, do you wish to speak?
Yeah, just briefly. Thank you, Mayor. So obviously this group of residents are concerned about this application. I've met with a couple of these residents in relation to their concerns. So this petition will be treated as a submission, which this application will be determined at a future Town Planning Committee meeting. And can I please ask that this does come to a Town Planning Committee meeting? I think it's important. So irrespective of the submissions, this goes to a Town Planning. I'll request that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Councillor Letitia Wilmot.
Thank you, Mayor. And yes, I support Councillor Owen's request on that. Ward councillors have received a number of emails over recent months in regards to this application. So I think it is important that we speak to it and see the full application and report at a Town Planning meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. And I'll just say that I support what you guys have put forward and like to see this come forward as well. And appreciate the residents that have put this submission forward to us, and appreciate their concerns, and they will be heard and noted and taken into consideration. Do I have any other councillors that wish to speak on this item? There being none, I'll go back to Councillor Owen to summarise.
No further. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. All those in favour? Carried. All right, moving right along. It's a lot quicker these days when there's only 4 of you to bounce question time between. It's You look lonely up there, Graham, I must say. Next on the agenda is item 9, temporary community advertising signage policy, withdrawn by Councillor Wilmot.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that the Council adopts the temporary community advertising signage policy V1.01, which is attached to the report, and implements the revised fee structure, which is the first 3 signs at no charge and a $20 application fee for every 3 subsequent signs. And I'll speak further on the changes if I get a seconder. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. Do I have a seconder for this item? Councillor Ross. Councillor Wilmot to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. As you all know, and will remember only too well, this came before the November meeting. And again, we had lots of questions around the policy from members of the gallery. And before the November meeting, I was rereading it and putting my community member hat on as having previously organised events and festivals. And there's a few things that just didn't sit quite right with me in the previous policy either. So I met with staff after the meeting in November, and we went through and did a bit of a brainstorm session and came up with some changes just to make it a little bit easier and to address some of the concerns that the members of the public had raised with us. And of course the biggest one was around the charges for signage. And what we've decided is that each application form has 3 locations listed on it where you can apply to have signs. So the first application will be at no charge. So that means all community groups, regardless of the size of the group or the event, will be able to have 3 of these advertising boards at no cost to them. For every subsequent application form, there'll be a $20 charge, and that's to try and cover and mitigate some of the expense of administrating these signs. So that's a big adjustment to the cost that will be imposed on community groups. So I think in the report it says that up to 18 signs will now be possible for a cost of $100. So that's quite a difference of charges being applied. The other one that was a bit contentious with some of the community was the number of locations that was in the original report. Originally, I think it was 5 within the growth corridor area and 4 in other locations. We've removed that restriction altogether. So if a community group is holding an event in Emerald and they can get somebody that's prepared to put up a community board at the site in Cooey Rough, fantastic, they can do it. And some of these bigger community events need to be able to advertise their events outside of their own wards and outside of their own areas to maximise the number of people that are coming to their events. So that's the other change, and hopefully the community groups will be able to utilise that. These signage that is covered under this policy is only the signage that it's usually real estate agents that supply this signage. Sometimes it's other companies, but they are just the temporary signage that estate agents supply, and they are only the ones that are put on council managed land. So if I've noticed in Cockatoo over the recent months, there's a number of properties in Cockatoo that have obviously agreed with the local agent to have temporary signage put outside their properties. So we can't control that. If the agents have sourced those sorts of properties and people are prepared to have signs for whatever events on their property, so be it. That's not covered under this policy. So it is only for council managed land, and it is only for those signs. Other temporary signs and so forth still need to get permits and permission, but they're not covered under this policy. So I hope that this policy is a little bit clearer and easier for community groups to work with, and I'm sure that at a suitable time we'll be doing an extra review. We've also changed the naming of the different areas, so it's not on wards now, it is the growth area, the hills area and the southern rural area. So that just makes it a little bit clearer, because ward boundaries will change at the next election, so then our policy will be no good again. So we've done it on geographical areas rather than on ward boundaries, just so it's a bit of a longer life for the policy. But I'm sure that there'll be other sites over the time that will be identified, and the policy will be reviewed when suitable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. Councillor Colin Ross to speak.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I must say the discussion between staff, councillors and reports has been very in-depth on this issue. I mean, many different views from around the room, from there should be nothing to do with signs at all. You should be able to just put them up wherever you like and cost you nothing, all the way through to people saying, well, we need to have some control, because some people have no control in this space. I believe that the solution that's come up with has satisfied many people around the room who gave examples of groups within the community who either wouldn't be able to afford to work with a policy that was onerous on having to spend too much money on merely putting in an application to get signs, all the way through to trying to control it so it's done in a respectful way that still meets their needs for the different events that they want to run. I think we've come up with a solution here that everyone in the room felt they could live with for the time being, and we'll see how it works out over the long term. I know most of these things that we do can always come back to council if we felt that it just was an overreach or it wasn't working. So anyway, I'll support this, and we'll look to see how it works out over time, whether we've found the sweet spot on this and we've got the solution right. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Do I have any other councillors who would like to speak to this item? Councillor Graham Moore.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This policy is in alignment with the council plan, our own council plan, in that it encourages our community participation, and we support that wholesale bolus, as we know. Community groups and their activities, as well as protecting and build the natural environment the thing is, we have to, we want to support our community and our community events. We're all got some participation in community events one way or another, and this wasn't feasible. I know we have to have policies in place. Sometimes I believe we're over-policied, but we have to have policies in place to satisfy our compliance, to make people comply. The only way we can do that is have policies, and this is one of them that's been ratified. It wasn't suitable to start with. It was too complicated, very complicated, and therefore it's very hard for the community and us as councillors and council staff to ratify it as we do out in the community. But just noting, of course, that the first 3 signs are free with our community events, and up to 6 signs, it's $20. Then it goes 3 signs, it goes to $40. So that's 9 signs. So therefore, we think that's come back down to something that is feasible within our community and what our community events can handle. And this is not a real estate signs per se. This is not covered by this policy. This is just for our community events. So I'm all for it. I think it's something that we can all live with, and our compliance team can follow through with this and make sure that everybody's doing the right thing. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Do I have any other councillors who wish to speak on this item? Councillor Owen.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors. I won't say much, but definitely it's great to see that, since this last was in a agenda, it's been changed, and councillors obviously contributed to those changes, and officers, so thank you. I do acknowledge the 10 submitters that council got in relation to this policy. 10 submitters is quite significant, so this issue is well talked about by our community, particularly our community groups that run events. I understand market signs is not part of this, because over recent months I've had concerns about any sort of pressure on market signs. I understand that's sort of been looked at separately to this. So in due course, those sort of further directions around market signs will be determined. But I support the need for those market signs. And we know we've got a number of monthly markets across our shire, and I think we need to support those as well. So I support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. And I'll just add to what Councillor Owen spoke to there. We did receive a number of submissions, and I think this was a really good process where the original concept that was put forward, the original policy was put forward, has been adapted significantly to better reflect the views of the community that it was affecting. So I think we've done really well on this, and I will also be supporting this. But I think we've done good in how we've developed this policy. So well done to the council staff that helped facilitate that. I'll go back to Councillor Wilmot to summarise.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, councillors, for your support. I'd also like to thank the staff that met with me, and it was a very productive meeting, and I think we have made some major changes to the policy that will help the community going forward. And as Councillor Moore said, it is about supporting our community and supporting the events that they organise. And we're lucky. We have some great events in this shire, and they should all be supported and encouraged to continue. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. We will now put this motion to a vote. All councillors in favour? Carried. Moving on to item 10. Cultural Diversity Plan 2019 to 2023, withdrawn by Councillor Wilmot.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that the recommendation that Council receive and adopt the Cardinia Shire Council's Cultural Diversity Plan for 2019 to 2023.
Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Ross. Councillor Wilmot to speak.
Thank you, Mayor. This policy has been in the making for quite a while now, and it's a good document. It's a very good document. This is our second diversity plan, the first being from 2015 to 2019. And within the policy, the plan rather, you'll see there's a list of all the achievements from that original policy. And a lot of those projects and those activities will continue on through this next policy, plan. So, and the diversity of our community is growing and changing every single day. From when our first policy or plan rather was developed in 2015. It's a very different environment out there now. We have communities that we perhaps never even planned on seeing within our shire are moving here, and that diversity is just bound to grow further and further. I won't go through all of the actions within this plan, but it is built around 4 key pillars, or priority areas rather, and those areas, I did mark them down, was welcoming diversity, building connections, promoting participation and sharing outcomes. And some of that was very clearly brought forward last November, when we held our first multicultural forum, which the COLD Advisory Committee organised. And it was very clear from the feedback that we received to that there is a sense of isolation out there for some of our communities. They struggle to find information, and they don't know where to start in being involved with some of our existing activities and groups and so forth. So those sorts of projects and actions are outlined within the plan. And I'll also note and thank everybody involved that the budget for our cultural diversity team has increased. It was only a $5,000 a year budget, which isn't a lot of money to do the activities that they were doing. So we've managed to increase their budget. So I'm sure that will be very greatly appreciated by the team, and very well appreciated by all of the different groups and activities that they organise. They work very closely, as I said, with the COLD Advisory Community, but they also work very closely with our Interfaith Network group that Councillor Ross is part of. So I'm sure that extra budget money will go a long way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. Councillor Colin Ross to speak.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I must say the Cultural Diversity Plan is one of the most important plans that we have with the changing population moving to Cardinia Shire. I must say, when I first got on council and when I first started to work in Pakenham, I worked at a place that had 350 people, and all of them were white Caucasian. There was no one who was born overseas. In fact, I'm telling a lie. There might have been a couple of Croatians that were there who'd lived in Australia for about 20 years anyway, and everyone else was all white Caucasian people. I must say, when I first got on council, realising the growth that was coming to Cardinia Shire as time would move on, I actually attended a free forum up at Shepparton in relation to cultural diversity and how councils provide services for their residents. And I must say, I listened to the Moreland Council, who said they had the backgrounds of 140 different countries living in their shire at the time, and trying to get a message across to all those people to feel included and be part of it was an extremely hard thing to have. I must say, as time's gone on here, as Councillor Wilmot pointed out, there are so many people who move into our area, and the quicker we can make them feel welcome and at home in our shire, the more they will become part of the fabric of Cardinia Shire. And I think it's a wonderful thing when people feel a real peace. I know our citizenship ceremonies, where people come along and they've decided in their life to make a huge change and make our shire their home, it is a huge thing. They're very excited. They're just excited about living in Cardinia Shire. And I just think the more we can do with our cultural diversity plan, which is very inclusive, and as Councillor Wilmot said, we've got many, welcoming diversity, building connections, promoting participation. It is all about how we make people integrate with us. I've also attended, ever since I've been on council, the interfaith group. And I must say, the respect given by all the different faiths, that we all attend each other's places, we all come along, we all celebrate each other's days that they support. They support each other's days, whether it be Christmas, whether it be some of their special days, we all support each other. And I must say, that's what it's all about, trying to make us all feel like we're rowing the same way. So I support this. This is doing some really, really good things. And if people sort of aren't aware, if you just look around our shire, some of the events that we have today are done with people who haven't been here a long time, and they want to make people feel welcome of all different backgrounds to come to their groups and their different functions. So anyway, this here, works into our council plan, and it gives our officers some direction around what they should be heading in the direction with the diversity and the cultural diversity. And I just can't wait to see this work through further and further into our new residents, and they won't feel as lonely as one of the councillors pointed out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ross, and that was well spoken. And I think your sentiments are reverberated through council. Councillor Wilmot is a huge advocate for this and part of her work on the called group, so I think it's really fitting that we are putting this forward tonight. I will certainly be supporting it myself. I'd also like to just thank the officers involved for the great work they do in this area, and recognising the work we want to do to help these different communities feel as inclusive as possible within our society in here. And I think we do a great job on this with our Shire, so everyone's to be commended on this, so thank you. Councillors, do I have any other councillors wish to speak? Yep, Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I'll be supporting this, the Cultural Diversity Plan for 2019-23. It's a fantastic plan. It is a very important plan to have within our community, and I was so elated to have that the budget has been increased from $5,000 per annum, which is rightly said by Councillor Wilmot, to $20,000. $20,000 per annum, guaranteed for the next 4 years. And I think that is fantastic what we're doing in that space. Just to increase this budget to provide, for new projects and strategic focuses on supporting our new growing society that we have. Our population is ever changing. And as mentioned by Councillor Ross, we do have festivals in all different shapes and sizes today. And we do support those festivals through our Festival Grants program. So we're with it all the way. It's a fantastic arrangement. So I'm all for this, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Any other councillors wish to speak on this item? There being none, I'll go back to Councillor Wilmot to summarise.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, councillors, for your comments. And Councillor Moore, I'm pleased that you're supporting it, seeing as you were the Mayor with the message at the front of the plan. So I'm very pleased that you're supporting this tonight. And as you said, we have increased the budget to $20,000, but it still doesn't cover the full cost of the action plan. So staff will still need to advocate for other funding from external sources. However, if council sometime in the future wants to increase the budget, I'm sure that will be greatly appreciated. And I also want to pass on my thanks to Glenda George, the author of this document, and our Cultural Diversity Officer. She's very well respected by our culturally diverse communities, and she's also very well respected from other service providers within this space. She's consulted with the advisory group, with the interface group. She was certainly well aware of what came out of the forum last year, and was certainly there to hear that come from the residents. So it's based on actual conversations with community members that are actually feeling the impact of being new residents within our Shire, and that's a good way forward, listening to those that the policy or the plan is going to directly impact, and that's the way it should be. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. Councillors, I'll now ask you to vote on this item. All those in favour? Carried. Moving forward to item 12, contract 19/22 Gembrook Recreation Reserve Pavillion Upgrade, withdrawn by Councillor Brett Owen.
Thank you, Mayor. I move the following: that Council 1 award the tender for contract number 19/22 Gembrook Recreation Reserve Pavilion upgrade to Insight Construction Group for the tender price of $2,357,000 excluding GST. 2, advise all tenderers accordingly. And 3, affix the council seal to the relevant contract documents.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Wilmot. Councillor Owen to speak.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. It is an exciting night for Gembrook because we're seeing, hopefully, 2 projects awarded to get improvement works happening. So the redevelopment extension of the existing Gembrook Recreation Reserve, football and cricket pavilion will provide unisex change rooms, unisex umpire change rooms, universally accessible amenities to all change rooms, first aid, a gym and storage, further a minor upgrade to the existing kitchen and social room area, reconfiguration of the server counters for accessibility requirements, updating of the spectator viewing. It is spectacular, but it's the spectator viewing lounge and timekeeper room and lift access, which is really important. So this has been a long time coming, and I think since I was elected as a Rangers Ward Councillor since 2012, this has been personally a project, and I think Councillor Wilmot as well, we've been advocating for. So it's great to see this investment once again in the hills, and I think over the last, I reckon, 8 years, you can say that the hills have finally got the investment in the community facilities that it deserves, and this is another example of that. So I do think the federal government, they're contributing $1 million towards this project. And I do apologise on behalf of council to the time it's taken to get this point, but there is a story behind why it's taken probably 3 years to get to this point. After the announcement of $1 million, council followed with budget allocation in the 18-19 budget. That's 18 months ago. But it was a $2 million budget, and it's fair to say, definitely the clubs involved wanted a really good facility, and that $2 million was not sufficient enough to deliver a project of their expectation. So it has taken time to work with the clubs, and they were initially going to manage the project, deliver the project, but that was deemed not possible. So it's gone back to council to go out to tender and run this project, and that $2 million budget has been quite difficult to meet. And as you can see, we're awarding tonight a tender of $2.3 million because it was very difficult to get under that $2 million, and that's why, after refinements and so forth, this is the best outcome we can get in relation to the money that was budgeted. So this is really good for Gembrook and the Cockatoo football netball clubs. This facility accommodates for both of those two townships in relation to their football and cricket teams. So this is a great outcome, and I'm really pleased we're delivering it, and work should commence early next year with the demolition and construction to follow. I'm really pleased that we're talking, in this report, we're talking about accessibility. Universal design for males and females, really good. I really like the direction that council is going in relation to upgrading our facilities for all genders. It's really important, particularly for young people, youth sport. So I'm really pleased that this upgrade will improve accessibility and universal access for all genders. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Councillor Wilmot to speak.
Thank you, Mayor. I really don't have a lot to add to what Councillor Owen said. He's covered it all off pretty nicely, but I will be very pleased to see, and I might even go and watch the first day of construction on the site. It's been a long time coming. 2015, the federal grant of $1 million was awarded, so it has been a long time. The club certainly advocated very heavily with ward councillors to get their support on board, and then certainly to Jason Wood, member for Latrobe, to secure that funding. And there has, as Councillor Owen said, been quite a story behind it since then. So it'll be nice to see it not only start, but it'll be great to see it finish. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. I agree with your sentiments. I would love to see this project get underway very much, and go sit in the spectacular spectator viewing lounge. It sounds quite enticing. But look, this will be a great asset for the community up there. So I look forward to it getting off the ground too. Any councillors, other councillors wish to speak, please? Councillor Colin Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I must say, this is one of the exciting things about being on council over a period of time, that you actually get to see things change. And I must say, when I first got on council, all of our pavilions, except maybe Tumac Valley, which now looks old, were very old and run down, and they were probably built, nearly all of them, 40, 50, 60 years ago. With the development of sport becoming more important with both genders, male and female, a lot of our pavilions weren't built to service both genders. And these come at a really good time because with the growth in sport, with females becoming more active and getting more involved, which is wonderful, these rooms can now be fitted for both sexes, for timekeepers, for umpires, and for the players themselves. I must say too, it's exciting and brings a real freshness to clubs that have been sitting around for a long time, just trying to do what they do. They can't raise a whole lot of money. Nevertheless, as time goes on, we try and encourage them that things will upgrade in the end. And like we've seen with the netball facilities around the Shire, and netball has never had any facilities really. They might have a little tiny shed, but in this case up at Gembrook, it'll be really, really exciting for them. I must say something I'm really proud of is when you go around other shires to look at their facilities over a whole, and then you look at ours are being upgraded in a really great way that when people come to visit, they say, that is really good, and I like those ideas and I like what you've done. So obviously we're hitting, and I'd like to congratulate the group that won the tender, Insight Construction Group. These sort of groups go through a really weighted criteria of in the tender assessments. We have things like compliance with specifications on what they put in as 10%. We have capability and capacity of the company 25%, relevant experience and past performance 30%, quality systems 10%, and project plan 25%. It all gets weighted up and we try and find the group who will be able to deliver the project best. And they won the development, so congratulations, and we look forward to seeing their good work in future. Congratulations, Gembrook.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Do I have any other councillors that wish to speak on this item? There being none, I'll go back to Councillor Brett Owen to summarise.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors. Just following up from Councillor Ross, 11 tenders were received, and I think that's really good to have that varied sort of interest. I think that makes it a competitive market. That's really good. We don't always get that, so to get 11 is really good. Sorry, that is for the netball court one, sorry, but sorry. That's the netball court one, which is the next item to be discussed. But we are seeing a lot of interest in relation to these tenders, so I look forward to it. It's going to be a great outcome for our community in Gembrook and Cockatoo. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Councillors, I'll now ask you to vote on this item. All those in favour? Carried. Moving on to item 17, contract 19/36 Gembrook Netball Court construction, withdrawn by Councillor Brett Owen.
Thank you, Mayor. I move the following. 1, the tender submitted by AS Lodge to undertake the works associated with contract 19/36 Gembrook Netball Court construction be accepted by Council for the contract sum of $504,580 excluding GST. 2, Council advise the remaining tenderers be advised accordingly. And 3, the common seal of the Council be affixed to the contract documents.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Do I have a seconder for this motion? Councillor Wilmot. Councillor Owen to speak.
Thank you, Mayor. We did get 11 tenders for this project, 11, which is really good. But anyone who knows the courts, the netball courts at Gembrook Rec Reserve, they are in poor condition with a deteriorating surface, damaged fencing and no lighting for practice or competition. The condition of the current courts make it difficult to attract new local membership, and my understanding is the club, which is the Gembrook Cockatoo, just Gembrook now. So Gembrook Netball Club haven't been able to play on these courts because how unsafe they are, and they've been doing that for some time. So it's really good that we've been able to achieve this project. So the report These courts are located at the Gembrook Rec Reserve. The site currently accommodates 2 netball courts, which are in poor condition and require replacement. So, as I said before, to get that sort of competitive tenders, I think that is a really good outcome for council. So we are proposing to go with AS Lodge for the sum of just over $500,000. So I look forward to these works. This project has been one that all 3 Rangers Ward councillors have been advocating for, along with the previous item as well. So I look forward to these works commencing very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Councillor Wilmot to speak.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I agree with the comments made by Councillor Owen. In fact, the club currently is doing all their training at the netball facilities at Mountain Road in Cockatoo because they just haven't been able to use these courts at all. So whilst currently there isn't a netball club in Cockatoo, it's folded and they've been utilising their facilities. It will be nice for them to be able to return to Gembrook and particularly for the young children that play in the younger teams to be able to train locally where they can just ride their bikes up to the courts and train rather than having to get mum or dad to drive them down to Cockatoo will be a blessing for all families, I'm sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. Do I have any other councillors who wish to speak on this item? There being none, I'll go back to Councillor Owen to summarise.
Just thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. In relation to this competition with football and netball, we know that the competition involves both netball and football running side by side, usually at the one location. So this will be great. Once the pavilion's finished, these netball facilities are finished, this will be a great outcome. I understand that the netball pavilion is not great either, and that will be a project that we will be looking into the future in relation to one day upgrading those facilities as well. And when that's done, that's just going to be fantastic for Gembrook. So I support that, and I look forward to these works being undertaken. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Councillors, I'll now ask us to vote on this item. All those in favour? Carried. Moving on to item 18, Major Projects Report, withdrawn by Councillor Wilmot.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that the Major Projects Report be received and noted, subject to the removal of the section of footpath between numbers 3 to number 7 Steen Street in Cockatoo from the footpath construction program, as this section of footpath is no longer required.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. Do I have a seconder for this item? Councillor Moore. Councillor Wilmot to speak.
Thank you, Mayor. As usual, each month we have this report presented to us. And several months ago when it first came out, I noted that this footpath was listed as being part of the program for this new financial year. It troubled me a little bit because this section of footpath it's in the middle of nowhere in a lot of respects. I understand what the staff were trying to achieve, but having lived at number 5 Steen Street for 21 years, I knew full well that nobody ever walked that way. So I met with the staff, put my case forward, and they agreed that that probably wasn't the smartest place to put a footpath, and they removed it from the list. And for a couple of meetings it wasn't on our list, but somehow the sneaky little thing snuck back in there. So in order that we move and accept a report tonight that is true and accurate and correct, we've needed to do this amended motion. And hopefully, over the holidays, it'll get lost well and truly and never appear again. But it's a footpath that would have needed to have, I think, about 9 or 10 major trees removed to actually construct it. And it went from one walkway to another one, but nobody, as I say, in 21 years I never saw anybody walk that way. It just doesn't happen. So it was good intentions behind it, but practicality sometimes has to take a lead in these things. But I won't speak to the rest of the report. It's all there. I'm sure everybody else has read it, and I'm sure that other people will mention things within the report. It doesn't vary a great deal from one month to the next because some of these projects don't vary a great deal from one month to the next. So, but I'll leave it to others to speak about their pet projects within the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. Councillor Graham Moore to speak.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to clarify something too on those footpaths before I go on to the major reserves. I know that a few years ago there was a footpath in Narnagoon, near the Narnagoon Primary School. Same situation as that was on the list. And it went to nowhere. It went to a gate. There was no gate anymore. They changed the front of the school to the back of the school because of the buses and things. So therefore there was no need for a footpath on that. I couldn't believe that it was still there from those years gone by. So I can understand exactly, Councillor Wilmot, where that will come from. But I'd just like to bring up just one thing, and that's the Bunyip Recreation Reserve Soccer Pavilion, which is just a fantastic, what a great building, what a beautiful building it is. And they've been waiting for this for so many years. It's funded by the Victorian Government Building Better Regions Fund, and through council as well, through council's funding. But it's it won't be long until it's till complete. I think it's March next year. And that community down there, the soccer club is just a fantastic soccer club, and they deserve all of this. They've been waiting for a long time and running out of just temporary buildings, one after another, for many, many years. So it's going to be really great to see that pavilion finished. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Do I have any other councillors that wish to speak? Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Looking through the report, I had to wade through the whole thing to find anything that was happening in Central Ward, but I actually did find some things. Mind you, Central Ward used to take in Beaconsfield, Officer and Pakenham all the way through to basically Deep Creek Reserve as well. Looking through here, there's some really exciting things happening in the Tumac Reserve Northern Pavilion and the Southern Pavilion. By the end of May 2021, the funding will be provided by Council, the Australian Sport Community Infrastructure Program, and the Australian Government will jointly fund the two pavilions being upgraded. The northern one needs to be upgraded because it really doesn't fit the needs for the unisex amenities there, because we've now got female football teams, we've got a lot more netballers being involved and wanting to have their own facilities, which is fair enough. And I must say that will be upgraded, that area. But I must say the area that I'm probably the most excited about is the little athletics and baseball facility in Tumac Valley Reserve. If anyone's ever seen it, it is the most deplorable facility I think I've ever seen. It is terrible, and they have waited a long time. Mind you, Council is looking to move them eventually into their own sites. In Pakenham East will be the baseball facility eventually, and the Little Athletics Club we've moved forward to move down to Henry Road next to the IYU Reserve there to get their own proper athletics spot there. But in the meantime, the Junior Football Club and Cricket Club will have their facilities and temporary facilities upgraded there for the Little Athletics and Baseball facility, which will come up to a standard that they'll actually feel proud to have people turn up to play against them instead of feeling terrible. I mean, I've been through there, it was just terrible. In fact, it's so small they have to use it mostly for storage instead of using it for what they need. Anyway, they've been very patient, like I know our motorsports facilities have, groups have been, and they will very much look forward to something happening in this area. I can't wait for May 2021. They'll be probably nearly as excited as the motorsports people when they finally get their facilities. That's all I wanted to add. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Russ. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Owen.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors. I just wanted to note that in the report we talk about the Pepe's Land Netball Pavilion. In item 14 in tonight's council meeting, which has not been withdrawn, if the vote goes through, this contract will be awarded $1.4 million in relation to the netball pavilion. This has been long awaited for. Another story of why it's taken this long, but it's great to see this finally being achieved. Long-term planning for Emerald has designated this site, Pepe's Land, for a future home for the Emerald Netball. So obviously the courts are already there. The committee is looking forward to this project being delivered. So I just wanted to note that. Also on page 259, with the General Manager, Ms Parker, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask a question in relation to the Timbertop Integrated Children's Centre. It is disappointing to read this report. It says, the Timbertop Integrated Children's Centre, proposed new children's learning centre. Funding, the project is funded by developer contributions and the Victorian Government. Timelines, this project is planned to open by January 2021, however, is being hampered by land acquisition issues from the developer. And I was just wondering, because I know residents have bought into Timbertop knowing that this facility is going to be here, be in that location. So can the General Manager just please provide a little bit more detail of what you can sort of advise Council in relation to what's happening in this space, and also the proposed school in the nearby area as well in Timbertop, if you don't mind.
Sure, through you, Mr Mayor. So that, as you've indicated, yes, Council has had some Thank you, Doug. I'll start again. Through you, Mr Mayor. As you've indicated, yes, Council has had difficulty in obtaining the parcel of land required for that facility. The Department of Education have been able to secure their land through a public acquisition process, but the developer has not come forth with our parcel of land. We are currently in VCAT with that land developer, trying to negotiate an outcome to that, but if we're unsuccessful in achieving that parcel of land within a very short term, then we'll need to proceed to looking at another location for a kinder to service that area, which would be on Ricks Road, which unfortunately would be on the opposite side of the highway. But until we can secure the land parcel, we're unable to put any further works into securing the funding or doing any design works on that site.
Thank you, Ms Parker. Thank you for that update. I really hope that gets resolved because I really want to see kindergarten in that area of Officer. The residents are hoping that also, so I look forward to those discussions hopefully being successful. Just want to briefly update, there's a number of female-friendly unisex change room upgrades that were happening in Rangers Ward, the Beaconsfield Rec Reserve, which is the Perth Allison Pavillion. This project is mainly funded by the state with a bit of council dollars as well. That project is progressing. I know designs are with the clubs to sign off. So officers have been working with the clubs involved, so that's good. Similar with the Officer Recreation Reserve, the Western Oval Pavilion. Thank you to the state government for providing the funds for a similar unisex upgrade in relation to that. We know that these two clubs, these two towns, really support female football, and this is going to be really good in that space. And also juniors and Auskick at Beaconsfield. The current change rooms at Beaconsfield, Perth Allison Pavilion, is just unacceptable. Rows of showers that probably was built in the very early 80s is not the way it's done now, and it does interfere with participation of young people and also females, so and males, all genders tend to be uncomfortable with that sort of arrangement. So this will be great, and thank you to the state government who are providing most of the funds for these two projects. So I look forward. Obviously council is managing it, running the design and tendering out, etc. So we've got heavy involvement, but these are great projects. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Do I have any other councillors that wish to speak to this item? There being none, I'll go back to Councillor Wilmot to summarise.
Thank you, Mayor. I think we actually ran out of councillors to speak on this report.
I know, I was giving everyone a chance to speak twice if they wanted to, but
it is the beauty of only having a few people around the table. We get through things a lot quicker. I thank my fellow colleagues for their comments on this report. It is always good to have these reports. there's a number of the projects that are almost complete, and there's a couple on there that are brand new. So it does revolve through. We've got the Gembrook Leisure Park that is almost there. In fact, next Friday we'll be celebrating with the community on that one, and I very much look forward to it. Mind you, only a week or so ago I was out at Gembrook and I thought, boy, they've got a long way to go. I hope they make it, and I'm sure if we're planning an event there, it will be done. But it'll be great to see that facility open again, and I'm sure the community are going to absolutely love it, coming into the warmer, fingers crossed, weather over the Christmas holidays. It's great timing to get it open just in time for the kids to really, what do you call it? Christen it, basically, over the Christmas holidays. They'll certainly be able to utilise it fully during that time, so that's great. Thank you, and hopefully everybody will support this.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. I'm too looking forward to taking my stepson down there for basketball. I've already had a look last week, and the fences are still up. So fortunately, we have daylight savings, and that crew can be working for 16 hours a day if they need to get it finished off. All right, councillors, we'll vote on this item. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you. That concludes the items listed for discussion. Councillors, I'll now ask if someone would like to, for a motion to adopt the remaining items listed that have been not withdrawn for discussion. Councillor Graham Moore, do I have a seconder? Councillor Letitia Wilmot. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you, councillors. Reports or minutes of committees. I note that several reports from various committees have been tabled in addition to the minutes of recent council briefing sessions, and these are available if any councillors wish to view them. Councillor reports. Councillors, do we have any matters that you wish to report? Councillor Brett Owen.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just try to be brief as much. In the last month, I attended the Beaconsfield Bendigo or Community Bank 10-year celebration of operation. Over the 10 years, they've donated over $350,000 distributed to community groups. So thank you to them. They continue to grow. The kids' fun day or fun run with Thomas in Gembrook a few weeks ago. I know the Mayor attended. What a great event that is. Raises tens and tens of thousands of dollars. I'm not too sure of the final amount, but last year was about $40,000 for the Monash Children's Hospital.
I believe it was close to 50,000 this year in total. It was a fantastic day, you're right.
It was great, and just young people also fundraised for the event, and it's amazing the amounts and the stories behind that as well, and I'm sure you might report on that.
And how was that young lady that raised the most money, and her story about her mum? Yes. And everything was beautiful there. So
well done to the Emerald and District Rotary Club for that. Recently, last month, the Casey Cardinia Foundation had a morning tea to award all the grant recipients. Over almost 70,000 was distributed via the grants program. And in addition to that, throughout the year, we were involved, the foundation was involved in distributing $160,000 in relation to the Bunyip complex fires. So that's really good that the foundation was involved in that and distributing funds to those people affected. Last Monday I attended the 20th birthday of the Gembrook Craft Group in their cottage. They're an amazing group of mainly ladies, not all. There's a few men involved in the craft group as well, but they've been in their current site, which is the previous Gembrook Maternal and Child Health little cottage. It was amazing to see almost 50 people squeezed into that room. Well, mainly it's a room, but and they were very appreciative of council in relation to the use of that building over 20 years. There's a few things they would like fixed, and hopefully we can work with them to achieve that, but they give so much back to the community, and also just that, companionship with people involved is awesome, fantastic. Last Wednesday or Thursday it was, Mayor, you and I attended the Upper Beaconsfield, Wednesday it was, a forum in relation to bushfires and the impact of bushfires and BMOs and Bell ratings in relation to insurance. and planning associated with that. It was a really good forum, and I'm hoping that maybe council can, help assist with more of those. It was targeted, it was in Upper Beak, and it's probably fair to say most attendees were from Upper Beak, but it was an open invitation, so maybe in the future we could do something very similar, because our residents are finding, real issues around insurance, and there's a lot of underinsurance, confusion about bell ratings and BMOs, and so it was a really good opportunity. So I commend the Upper Beaconsfield Association for organising that. And finally, a couple of weeks ago, I had the pleasure of joining Mr. Tony O'Hara at an information session of the major road project. And my interest is obviously about the Monash improvements, but what's going to happen in Beaconsfield in relation to the O'Shea Road connection. So as you leave office to get onto the freeway, you go to a big roundabout to get onto the Monash. So we know that area will become a full diamond interchange. The extension to O'Shea Road will be, what I learnt, 3 lanes in each direction from that connection of the freeway to Clyde Road. So that's major works. I think works will start, early next year, and by the end of 2022, they're expecting it to be finished. And that will have a real impact about, how we travel in that area, how we get onto the freeway to go to Gippsland. Obviously, we'll reduce pressure on Cardinia Road, it will reduce pressure on Clyde Road. It will provide, improved connections to the south of Berwick and Clyde North. So it was good to attend that information session, but I learned it was going to be 3 lanes in either direction, basically from that interchange at the freeway to Clyde Road. So there is obviously information on the website available to residents, so I encourage you to have a look at that. But it's good that that's progressing. After a long years of campaigning by residents and council as well, this council, we're finally seeing some room, things happening in that space. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Any other councillors have any reports to make? Yeah, Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor. I did. We had a celebration barbecue recently with down at the depot with the staff down there who went in the November fundraiser. You might have noticed, but I've lost my mo for that reason. I'm going to leave it off, by the way. So my dog's used to it now, so I'm going to leave it as it is. But I've just got to say that it was a fantastic celebration down there, and of course with the whole staff here that were involved in November here, they raised over $20,000 fundraising for prostate cancer research. So did a fantastic job as a group. It's really good to work together as a team, and so I was really good to be involved in that. That was on the 28th of November, which is good. But the other day, it was on the 3rd of December. We had in here the Deputy Mayor and I. I don't know whether this is a position or not, but I'll call it at the moment. We were here for it's the 4th annual Geography Student Community Outreach Awards, and it was for eye mapping. And it was an amazing thing to come and listen. There was 2 of our schools were involved, and they got awards. The Coorup Primary School and the Beacon Hills Primary School both got awards here on the night. And they actually did a project on mapping a certain area that had a 20-kilometre radius of what they would have in that 20-kilometre radius, like as in planning. So there was some interesting things coming out of there from the young students, the primary school students, and I might pass all those ideas across to you, Ms. Parker, to put into planning to see whether there's some things that we could take out of that. But it was really great to be involved in and helping the awards ceremony that night. But the other day, the Mayor and I must say this, Mr. Mayor, if I may, at the Harold Bold annual luncheon thing, where you have the 2 new students who walked the Dakota Trail. And they're 2, one's from the Lutheran College, which is for the first time in Lakeside, and another one from Pakenham Secondary College who really support that. And we support it. We fund it. We do a lot of funding for that Harold Bold. And I've got to tell you that it's been renamed, which is really exciting to have. One of our former councillors, his mother's been recognised Wilma Young has been recognised on that because of her work that she's done in that area with the RSL, and now it's the Bold Young Award now, so it's been changed to that, which is really fantastic to have her recognised in place, so that's really good to see. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. And it was. I had no expectation of what was happening with the young and his David's presentation, and it was very touching to see him talk about his mother after it was talked about beforehand about the contribution she's made, and then he's to step up and speak to that was a really and the connection they have with the community down there, the Bolds and the Youngs, was really it's good to be in part of that community and listen to these stories. It was a great event. Any other councillors that wish to report? Councillor Colin Ross.
I'm only going to add one because some of them have been shared already. The other night, on Saturday night, myself, my wife and our daughter and Councillor Brett Owen and his two sons attended the Timbertop Christmas celebrations in Officer. It was a wonderful celebration there of the community. I think most of the people in the community would have come down to have a look over the period of time that it was on. They had modern songs, they had Christmas songs, they had ice creams there, they had sausages, and they had the whole lot. It was a really, really good time. All the people who attended, I'm sure, were impressed. I think it was the second time it's been run, and they're doing it really well. I must say it was one of the things that I thought was really impressive was the leading pastor there from Fellowship Church, who also runs down on Tuesdays and Thursdays down at Burke Park, the food bank down there with everything down there for people who aren't so well off. He had all the kids up on stage asking them what they wanted for Christmas. And he asked them what was so special about Christmas, and some of the responses we had were just quite amazing. I think Brett's son said that he wanted St Kilda to win a premiership, was that right? And Luke barracked for St Kilda as well, and he said, I hope that as well. Yeah, so anyway, look, it was a great time had by all. I think the more celebrations we have like this where we all come together, it just celebrates the season and we all enjoy each other's company at the end of a long year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Russ. I'm going to make a quick mention of a couple of things myself. Firstly, the Upper Beaconsfield seminar that myself and Councillor Owen attended last week really wants to be noted again because they got so much community out. There must have been 250 people or something in that room, it seemed like, and that was such good buy-in from the community, and I think it reflects the sentiment and the concerns that is out there. So whatever we can do to help people understand how they can best look after their properties and their situations moving forward, I think is a great effort on our behalf. And the one residing thing that came out from it was that many properties are underinsured, and it's something that's worth considering for everyone that's in a bushfire, designated bushfire risky area type thing. Losing my words here, but because there's many factors involved, and as time progresses, your house that cost you X amount 30 years ago, it's a very different story now when you need to rebuild to a certain standard and you need to have water tanks in place and such. So it's worth noting. On a happier note, I was really happy to be invited along to the Sounds of Nature Music Festival at Gembrook World a couple of weeks back. And cut a ceremonial ribbon with Ron, the CEO, but just such a great initiative for them to bring something like that. Some fantastic artists, Australian artists, premier artists to our doorstep, and the festival environment out there. It was beautiful. There was about 3,500, 4,000 people all spread out in the lawns, some jumping up and down, dancing in front of stage, but it was a really good event to see within our borders. So I'm very supportive of that moving forward to see some more of that. I went along to Fernley House AGM recently. So for those that don't know, Fernley House is a community-run organisation that helps care for people with disabilities and especially people in the aged care sort of space of their lives. And they do such a tremendous job on a minimal amount of staff, mostly volunteers run, and really help out some community members. And I have a personal story. My mother is a regular visitor there at their day respite centre, and over the last 8 months of her attending there, the difference it's made in her life and the isolation that she feels otherwise, being an elderly person with severe dementia. It's priceless, and all that comes at a price of $50 a day for her to go and get a gourmet meal, lunch, and 5 hours worth of care and volunteers. It is absolutely fantastic. Just one that I attended with Deputy Mayor Councillor Moore was the thank you morning tea for the volunteers involved in the bushfire recovery effort at Lady Lavender Tea Rooms a few weeks ago. And I think it was about my first week on as mayor and the job, and it was so good to go and see all the people involved and the connectedness they had in the community there, and the amount of appreciation they shared for the staff involved that helped them through the recovery effort, and through council being led through our fantastic CEO here through that process. They were so appreciative. It was a wonderful thing to see, and just to thank the mayor for his efforts in this over the last year, leading that forward. It's been fantastic. Just lastly, I have something I've been given to show off tonight, which is the winner, Promoting Healthy Eatings, the Cardinia Food Circles by Cardinia Council. And this was from Vic Health, and maybe Ms. Parker can explain a little bit more, but we won this award from Vic Health just the other day, I believe. If you would share some more for us.
Mr. Mayor, that's correct. So each year, Vic Health have an annual awards ceremony. So they have 10 categories relating. There's obviously this one about promoting healthy eating. There's also stuff about working with youth. There's other sort of preventative programs. There's also awards around research. And Cardinia was nominated in our category, and there was 11 other projects that were nominated in our category, and we successfully won. So there was over 257 in total nominees across all of the categories. So the awards were presented by the new CEO of Vic Health. So it was a great evening at the RACV Club in the city. So we really had great pleasure in receiving that award on behalf of council, and the great work done by the Food Circles team, and also our partners Sustain and the Australian Agricultural Group.
Great, thank you, Tracy. It's a wonderful effort, and it's good to have our council staff recognised for this for their initiatives in this space. Thank you. No, councillors, do we have any other reports they wish to? No. Okay. Well, that will conclude tonight's meeting. Before I do my little conclusion part, I'd just like to say a thank you to our community for participating in council business and activities during 2019, and wish everyone a happy and safe Christmas break. Council will take a break from council meetings, but we'll be back in early February 2020 to keep all the fun rolling. So I hope the gallery comes in with fantastic attendance. It's good to have an audience. It's such a great audience in front of us. We can still pull the crowd. Do we have any presentations of petitions before I finish? I should mention. No petitions to present? Okay. Then that concludes tonight's proceedings. Before closing this meeting, as this is the last meeting for the year, I extend to you all compliments of the season. I trust that you all will have a very Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, and we'll see you all back here in the chamber in February. So thank you all for your attendance, and I declare this meeting closed. Thank you.